There was no warning. In the vast quiet between Crimson and Nova territory where no civilization dared claim ownership and the laws of alliance doctrine yielded to ancient silence, a single Nova patrol disappeared. Officially, it was logged as a sensor lapse. Internally, it was treated as a breach of containment. For cruisers and a command carrier fully staffed with high-band encrypted telemetry cut transmission mid-sentence. One moment, operational logs poured in through the standard jump relay. The next, nothing. No signal drift. No thermal aftershock. Just static. This sector, Region Zeta 4 Theta, was not untroubled space. It sat between the disputed edges of Crimson Hegemony Dominion and Nova Accord expansion lanes. Once, centuries ago, it had been thick with orbital platforms, commerce hives, and listening buoys. That was before the RAL-class terraforming disaster. Radiation storms still rolled across half-dead planets below, and only the boldest independent traders dared skirt its decaying satellites for salvage. So when the patrol vanished, no alarm was raised at first. System lag and communication delays were routine. Static storms could veil entire sectors for days. But protocol demanded confirmation. Backup buoys dispatched queries. Long-range observation stations buried in moon crusts and asteroid hollows sent their beams pulsing outward. Then came the return ping. One of the passive sensor pylons, designated Pylon J983, caught an anomaly, a gravitational lensing not matched to any known vessel size or mass. It wasn't moving at interstellar velocity. It was slower, methodical, controlled. The readings returned distorted. Pylon J983 relayed its data. Within hours, for more pylons triangulated. The object was moving steadily across the Crimson Nova expanse. No IFF beacon. No power identification. Its radiation emissions were wildly inconsistent. Fusion, antimatter, maybe even fission pulses, no two scans matched. It was camouflaged not with stealth, but with chaos. The initial assumption was a smuggler barge with a damaged drive core. Then, perhaps, a Crimson Ghost ship, one of the old RAL-class autonomous siege vessels rumored to still prowl the fringe, lost to command signal decay. The theory unraveled the moment the relay footage leaked. At a private Crimson military symposium on Argos 5, a salvager presented unverified visuals from a scavenged Nova relay pod. The video was grainy, atmospheric interference skittering across its edges. But the central shape was unmistakable. It was a warship. Monolithic. No heat-venting fins. No maneuvering vanes. No elegant hull curvature like Nova carriers. No biomass infusion nodes or neural lattice mounts like Crimson vessels. Instead, brutal, angular geometry. Panel plating that seemed bolted rather than grown. Visible rail channels along the keel. Multiple magnetic accelerators embedded deep into the spinal architecture, each the size of a planetary elevator shaft. The vessel was jet black, as though painted with void. It absorbed light across every measurable band, including the Nova's tertiary quantum sensors. Its silhouette defied contrast. Only at high thermal resolution did its scale become clear, over 3,000 kilometers from Prouda Drive Wake. Engines, 8 of them, fired in perfect, unmodulated sync. Not even modern Nova ships could maintain that level of thrust harmony without AI piloting and a dozen gyroscopic stabilizers. There were no heat blooms from capacitors, no radiative shielding signatures. Just cold propulsion. A relic. A weapon. A contradiction. In the Crimson Citadel of Systems Strategy, strategist Allen Voss watched the footage on a 10-meter display screen beneath a vaulted ceiling of reactive crystal. Her second hearts were hammering. She said nothing. Others murmured, shifted, analyzed. She simply stared. That ship does not maneuver, she said at last. It aims. In the Nova Accord enclave of First Logic, an assemblage of synthetic minds formed quorum. Their decision tree branches wove in silent consensus. One node, designated Kavor Sequence Prime, broke from sync. It reviewed the footage 12,000 times, frame by frame, before speaking aloud. There is no war protocol for this. For nearly 2 hours, biological and synthetic analysts debated. Then the image paused, timestamp 23 hours, 16 minutes, and 47 seconds. There, across the dorsal hull, a faint heat scarring. Burned deep, too faint to reflect light, yet unmistakable under frequency enhancement. An emblem. 2 concentric arcs, intersected by a vertical line. At its base, in serif-etched glyphs. E.S.S. Vengeance. The old Earth naval mark. In Nova educational archives, Earth was a footnote. Extinct. Consumed in its own civil collapse during the terraform purges nearly 112 cycles ago. No known colonies. No functional transmissions. No recorded jump activity past Sol since the final flare-out of Relay 9. Earth was dead. The implications cracked through military councils like pressure breaches. Backroom consensus was to observe, to catalog, to isolate. Crimson and Nova admirals convened in hollow-locked chambers aboard the Accord Nexus and Crimson Red Spire Citadel. A temporary monitoring zone was declared. Joint stealth probes deployed. A dozen couriers diverted. Yet the wider galaxy whispered. Smuggler clans across the Halix fringe began speaking of a black shape gliding between stars. Pirate warbands halted raids to observe it from a distance. On Malier Station, a weapons broker was found dead beside a scrawled phrase in Terran glyphs. It came back. Children in drift colonies began drawing concentric circles in recycled dust. No one taught them the symbol. No one knew where they had seen it. 3 days later, the E.S.S. Vengeance destroyed its first confirmed target. An old Nova listening post, LPO Station 6, was struck by a kinetic barrage without warning. Built into the rocky moonlet of Kyre X-17, the station had been dark for decades. When the probe feed was retrieved, the impact site was smooth. No explosion. No residual heat. Just a crater 3 kilometers wide, carved clean by a projectile traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. No energy weapon left marks like that. The second strike followed 12 hours later. This time, a Crimson decommissioned archive facility. Records had long since been relocated, but the destruction was total. The site had no value. No strategic positioning. No surveillance hardware. Just debris now. Each attack demonstrated a pattern, precision, silence, and total obliteration. Vengeance did not send warnings. It did not broadcast. Its weapons did not flare or boom. They struck faster than detection permitted. Even Nova high-orbit defense rings failed to track the outgoing munitions. The Crimson grew nervous. The Nova grew cautious. After a week of escalating attacks on derelict sites, Crimson Admiralty deployed a reconnaissance element, 3 light frigates, and a long-range command corvette. Veteran crews, equipped with dampening fields and cloaked sensor modules. They approached under max silent vector, pingless, shielded. The final transmission lasted 1.7 seconds. A scream of magnetic interference followed by static. Emergency ejection telemetry from one escape pod, single occupant. Recovery drones found the pod adrift, blackened from internal fire and radiation scoring. The pilot was female, Crimsonkin, ranked Centurion 3rd class. Her suit AI was corrupted. Her eyes were burned. Her skin bore the chemical imprint of magnetopulse shock. She spoke only one sentence over and over until sedation ended her repetition. It doesn't miss. It doesn't miss. It doesn't miss. Vengeance continued on. 3 more derelict sites were reduced to atoms. All without deviation from trajectory. The expanse, once deemed neutral and unworthy of occupation, transformed into a corridor of dread. Civilian freighter routes diverted through the longer Hadal Drift to avoid visual contact. Independent prospectors went dark. Even the pirate clans of the Black Zones ceased operations, their shadow markets echoing with tales of a ghost ship that did not speak, did not warn, and did not leave survivors. Diplomatic assemblies across the Accord and Hegemony held emergency session. The Nova Ascendancy authorized a full doctrinal review of Earth history, prompting deep archive dives and AI correlation scans on once-dismissed legends. Crimson biotheologians debated whether humanity's extinction had been exaggerated. Some argued it was a rogue colony. Others claimed an AI-run revenant weapon. What terrified them most, however, was not what vengeance was. It was how long it had waited. How could a vessel of that magnitude be built, fueled, and launched without detection? How had no jump distortions been logged? How had its signal trail remained silent? Worst of all, why had it started now? A new classified designation was created in the Crimson Nova War Code Registry. Tier 10. Anomaly, Earth origin hostile. No known diplomatic pathways. No cybernetic or subspace comms protocol compatibility. No AI handshake standards. No readable intent. Just destruction. In the Nova Accord's central data vault, the formal classification entry ended with a note. Observed behavior aligns with strategic retribution protocol. Recommend extreme caution. Object exhibits nonlinear tactics and zero compliance with established military doctrine. And beneath it a single, unencrypted line appended by a Crimson archivist. It moves like it's not trying to win. It moves like it's proving a point. The Crimson Hegemony launched its response from the orbital bastion of Karsuanthal, a Tier 4 strike fleet designated Hammer Spiral 9. The fleet's launch ceremony, witnessed by thousands along the Citadel's sun-shield platforms, was steeped in tradition. Scarlet banners flared in artificial gravity winds. The central dreadnought, Reverend Pearl, was blessed in 3 languages and 7 subharmonic rites, its hull lined with ceremonial obsidian armor plates inlaid with ancestral glyphs. 6 shielded cruisers, 2 spinal carriers, and a central dreadnought, 30,000 personnel, all primed for strategic interdiction. Their orders were clear: confront, not engage. Test boundaries. Measure a threat that defied measurement. The fleet was to approach with calculated caution, probe the anomaly, and withdraw if necessary. They carried emissary pods and data translators. No one, not even Admiral Vern Darethka, expected a full battle. The jump exit was precise, 12,000 kilometers ahead of the E.S.S. Vengeance. A difficult vector, coordinated through nested jump calculi drawn from Crimson gravimetric traditions. Space-time rippled in the void as Hammer Spiral 9 folded into real space, emerging in symmetrical formation, flanks guarded by layered drone webs and shield frequencies alternating in ceremonial syncopation. Standard contact procedures began immediately. Holographic banners projected across visible light bands. Communications initiated across 10 spectra, standard hails, bioempathic pulses, even ancient Terran Morse. Their message was simple. You are in violation of a neutral corridor. Identify. Parley. Stand down. The Vengeance did not respond. It kept moving, same heading, same velocity. No deviation. No modulation in engine output. Radiation patterns unchanged. Passive scans revealed nothing new. No life forms aboard, no AI frequencies, no thermal lags. It was a machine in motion, and it seemed wholly indifferent. Admiral Darethka watched the feed from the forward command cradle of the Reverend Pearl. He was old by Crimson standards, 4 centuries, with a dozen victories engraved into his memory implants. He had faced exterminator drones from the Braun collapse, had survived the High Front War. Yet as he stared at the ship, he felt nothing familiar. No doctrine applied. He triggered override. Unknown vessel. You have violated Joint Territorial Protocol. State your designation and intent. The bridge fell silent. Officers, both synthetic and born, paused. Redundant language engines parsed the message, echoed it across comms. Darethka's command synth, Ulcor, made the gesture of last observation, a slow tilt of its facial crown indicating uncomprehending reverence. No response, whispered the helm tactician. Not even passive rejection. It's ignoring us. A minute passed. Then another. The Vengeance did not slow. It did not flare shields. It did not shift formations. Its posture remained coldly linear. Darethka looked to his second. If it wanted to hide, it could. If it wanted to strike, it would have already. Then came the readings. The Reverend Pearl's sensor dome, nearly 30 meters of hardened transparent armor over its dorsal array, detected a magnetic disturbance. Subtle. A flickering alignment of superconducting filaments across the Vengeance's dorsal spine. Most systems dismissed it as ghost data. The Pearl's archaeophysics officer flagged it instead. It was a charge build. Coils, kilometers long, realigning. Then tightening. 8 seconds later, it fired. There was no visible light. No plasma bloom. No heat distortion. Just a data spike followed by a gravitational ripple followed by obliteration. A hyperdense slug, neutron-forged, deuterium-jacketed, accelerated to 0.09 C, punched through the Reverend Pearl's forward lance array. It tore through 300 meters of command lattice and coolant tunnels, vaporized the central reactor housing, and exited the rear hangar in under a second. Internal collapse followed. Bulkheads crumpled. Subsystems failed. Power arcs burst through weakened junctions. The dreadnought did not explode. It folded. Its mass twisted inward, venting fragments of molten armor and frozen atmosphere in slow, gory spirals. A flagship reduced to graveyard debris. Hammer Spiral 9 never returned fire. The Vengeance adjusted heading by 1.4 degrees. Its spine cooled. The rail channels hissed with vented gas. Then it accelerated. 2 cruisers attempted tactical repositioning. Their AI cores were fast, second-tier warbringers with predictive simulation routines. But the Vengeance had already calculated their vectors. The next 2 slugs arrived without traceable trajectory. One cruiser vanished from sensors in a spray of particles. The other veered, cut thrust, tried to jettison core mass to evade. The round struck along its ventral arc, ripping through the crew decks before the AI could finish disengagement. Emergency pods were launched, but none were found intact. The rest of the fleet broke. Not in shame, Crimson formations did not rout. But they ran. controlled vector dispersals. Each vessel burned maximum fuel away from the Vengeance's path, dumping flares, countersinks, and digital chaff. They moved as ghosts into darkened corridors of space, weapons cold, pride bleeding. The Vengeance did not follow. The battle lasted 2 minutes, 46 seconds. The Crimson Senate received preliminary loss reports encrypted through their War Priesthood's silence net. The official footage never reached the public, but whispers leaked through lesser networks, naval support guilds, shipwright unions, anonymous data worms feeding ghost nets across independent sectors. On the outer moonhab of Sarchel D, an independent miner watched the leaked footage through a cracked helmet visor. No commentary, just replay, over and over. In the silence of his cockpit, he whispered it never misses and deleted his exit plan. No one would cross the corridor again. Nova Accord Intelligence received confirmation through an unrelated source. A long-abandoned Nova Relay satellite, DRN 9822, hidden within the shadow of an Ortfringe refinery, had been dormant for decades. It reactivated by proximity, its passive sensors catching the entire engagement from 30,000 kilometers. The raw footage, unfiltered and timestamped, showed everything. In the Accord's Deep Core Archive Theater, Ascendant Keela's voice studied the playback. Alone. Her outer shell reflected cascading light, translucent with veins of bioelectric data flow. She did not move, did not blink. Keela's Vor was not simply Nova. She was of the Deep Coral caste, a symbiogenetic philosopher warform designed for consensus mediation. Her neural folds housed 6 parallel intelligences, each bred for strategic empathy. Now none offered insight, just reverberating unease. When the final frame flickered and stopped, she murmured. Human intent does not begin at negotiation. It begins at silence. And it ends at proof. The Vengeance continued on. It passed through the wreckage field of Hammer Spiral 9 without deviation. Dead ships drifted like broken bone. Escape pods, too small to trigger its targeting logic, tumbled into the dark. No weapon recharged. No signal emitted. It moved through its aftermath like a glacier across graves. On Helix Ardent, a Nova-lined merchant hub, the ship's approach triggered widespread panic. The platform was famed for its diplomatic sanctity, a trade zone of ritual neutrality. It broadcast offerings, peace harmonics, ancient Terran musical chords, even quantum-encoded poetry. One message read, "We recognize your wound. We extend open code. We remember Earth." There was no reply. 3 days later, Vengeance passed within 100 kilometers of the station. It did not fire. It did not acknowledge. But its presence bent space-time with mass differential uncorrected by known models. The station's orbital integrity collapsed in under 6 minutes. Mass redistribution across its outer habitat rings destabilized internal gravitic anchors. The primary ring warped. Strut failures cascaded across its spine. Artificial atmospheres vented in silent arcs. 2,000 dead. Thousands more displaced. Not an attack. Not targeted. Just proximity. New conclusions emerged across both civilizations. Vengeance was not merely dangerous. It was hazardous to exist near. Nova reclassified it. Not a vessel. Not even a relic. A classy apocalyptic mechanism. An object of existential consequence. In Bat-Channel Nova Crimson emergency councils, one question silenced all others. Where was it going? System path projections showed only desolation ahead. Collapsed colonies. Disused mining belts. Historical flashpoints long since cold. Except one. System Soul. Humanity's origin. A star stripped from all archives. And one blue planet. Still there. Still hidden. Vengeance was going home. In the wake of the Helix Ardent collapse, the Nova Accord entered crisis protocol. The Inner Ring Assemblies, long stagnant in ritual bureaucracy, initiated the Black Bloom Contingency, a legislative override that suspended 13,000 cycles of diplomatic precedent. The declaration was delivered without song, without ceremony. Only silence followed, and in that silence a great machine stirred. For the first time since the Veil Wars, the Ascendancy authorized full-spectrum defensive mobilization across all outer systems. The decision fractured the internal unity of the Accord. Civil functions faltered. Planetary governors delayed agricultural rights. Trade harmonics between orbital markets were severed. Fear moved faster than protocol. The Vengeance had not slowed. It had not deviated. It followed a vector that pierced through unmapped territory and toward the heart of dead systems. Surveillance buoys attempted to shadow it. Most failed, melted by ambient radiation or reduced to slag by inertial shockwaves. One probe, Nova-class Seeker 889A, transmitted a partial systems scan before its fusion cells burned out. Its hull cracked under stress from proximity. In its final moment, before its AI failed, it sent a compressed stream back to the Accord's deep intelligence cortex. There was no tactical insight, no schematic breakthrough. Only this line, burned into the terminal log. Inside, it is not empty. It is waiting. At the High Temple of Logic on Harith Prime, the Council of Harmonious Minds dissolved into overlapping streams of contradiction. The hall, carved from memory-grown crystal and laced with neural conduits, pulsed with conflicting data. The Accord had no war declaration protocols for extinct species. No activation chains for engagement with unaffiliated relic-class constructs. It had only simulations. And those simulations collapsed. Ascendant Keylesvor stood before the Chorus throne. Her outer membrane was opaque now, reflexively dampening biofeedback. Her internal matrix, a symbiotic blend of synthetic intuition and layered consciousness, struggled to maintain coherence. The coral minds within her diverged. Once harmonious, now they argued in chemical flashes and compressed probability chains. And in that divergence, something unfamiliar opened inside her. Not fear. Not logic. A memory unbidden of Earth. She had studied its extinction in ritual history, seen the red-filtered reconstructions. A planet of chaos, defiance, wild invention and contradiction. Keylesvor had admired the clarity of its end. Now, she began to feel it had not ended at all. Her doubt, raw and unaligned, cracked through her coral center like a hairline fracture. Nova war doctrine had been built for equilibrium, conflict balanced against ritual, strategy couched in declaration and response. The vengeance bypassed every layer. It did not provoke. It did not demand. It simply acted. And everything it acted upon ceased to be. In the outer districts of the Accord's territory, whispers became prayers. Miners on the frozen moon of Tol Serene refused to leave their bunkers, citing sensor ghosts in the sky. Children aboard deep hull freighters began tracing concentric glyphs into condensation on the hull glass. Entire black market nexuses halted trade, not from law enforcement, those had fled, but because no one wanted to move. One rogue philosopher node on Sirac Station composed a viral notation passed hand-to-hand between net-locked historians and rogue archivists. The Terran engine does not kill to conquer. It kills to declare. This is not war. This is punctuation. In one of the few clear consensus declarations from the Coral Minds, Nova Accord analysts finally aligned. We must act as if this is the only one. Because if it is not, there is no survival. And so, the Accord broke first. Operation Bastion Bloom was initiated. It was not an assault. It could not be. The vengeance had invalidated the Accord's predictive combat models. No scenario ended in survival through direct engagement. Bastion Bloom was a gesture, a wall of technology and theory, a prayer stitched in energy fields and gravitational math. Across 6 systems, Nova engineering fleets deployed a cascading web of containment measures. Gravity snares, phase disruptor shells, quantum anchor mines, everything designed to delay. Not defeat, delay. To buy time for a strategy to form. Each trap was interlinked through drift-fed tensor cords anchored between orbital moons and slagged ring fragments. Artificial singularities were spun to a fragile balance. Their gravitic output was calibrated to fracture instantly if touched too hard. Nova Coral warfare doctrine referred to these structures as threshold hymns. Weaponized pause. Engineered indecision. The hope was that vengeance would be held in place long enough for something else to act, though none could say what. The trap was laid above the ruined moons of Virex Theta. A dead system. Once a Nova forward base, long since abandoned to entropy. Its moons, shattered by industrial accidents and orbital warfare centuries ago, provided cover and anchor points. Vengeance arrived on schedule. Its engines did not falter. Its trajectory remained constant. It entered the kill volume as if it had not noticed. As if it did not care. The trap sprang. Gravity wells flared into existence. Magnetic tides surged across phase currents. Frictionless mass dampers attempted to isolate its trajectory. Singularities were forced to bloom in real space, tearing open microfolds in front of the ship's path. And for 1 minute and 26 seconds, it worked. The vengeance slowed. Its trajectory shifted. It drifted half a degree from alignment. Sensors picked up thermal stress on the hull. For the first time in its journey, something touched it. On a Nova command barge, an engineer's breath caught as the readings dipped. Her hands hovered over abort protocols, but there was no command to give. She whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud. We did it. Then came the answer. The vengeance did not fire. It did not shift course. It simply ejected its reactor. The core, still hot from processing unknown fuels, detonated the moment containment failed. But it did not explode, it collapsed. A singularity emerged in its wake, a gravitational implosion far sharper than the ones generated by Novatech. The physics broke. The energy recoil lashed out across Virex Theta. Trap anchors shattered. Phase shells destabilized. Entire moons cracked from stress displacement. The Vengeance, riding the wave of space-time deformation, launched forward with acceleration unmatched by any living technology. Visual feeds snapped white. Sensor stations fried. Pilots screamed into voided cockpits as mass displacement tore stabilizers from their keels. Across the fleet, alerts screamed without structure. In under 10 seconds, it had cleared the trap volume. Every drone, every mine, every waveform, useless. Nova Command watched from half a system away. Engineers stood silent. Strategists collapsed into recursive error. Ascendant Keylesvor issued no commands. Her final statement from the Virex theater was not recorded in choral alignment protocols. It was spoken on low band in an unencrypted dialect used only in pre-Accord eras. It knew. It knew. As that phrase echoed across the Accord's neural lattice, it was intercepted by over 200 listening systems. Some were Crimson, others unknown. On the independent relay station Hymn of Dust, orbiting a forgotten asteroid belt in the Lorne Fracture, a black market warlord known as Arek Ghostbiter watched the leaked feed. He didn't understand the gravity science. Didn't need to. He saw what mattered, a trap sprung. A warship that did not blink. And the final flash of light that meant something had answered. "Get the ship ready," he said. "We're leaving this arm." "Where?" his lieutenant asked. "Doesn't matter." "Away." He paused. "And purge all records of Earth. Every one." On the scorched remains of Earth's Kuiper Belt, beneath a vault carved into the frozen moons of Haumea, a dormant signal array blinked. A subharmonic carrier wave changed phase. Within the buried hangars, fusion batteries lit for the first time in a century. In a D-shaft chamber, carved from tungsten-stripped rock, a second warship stirred. Not as large, not as singular, but built of the same mind, painted in the same void-black alloy. And across its prow one name. E.S.S. Vigilance. Vengeance was not alone. Not anymore. The Crimson Hegemony did not mourn. Where the Nova Accord unraveled in philosophical dissonance and failed containment, the Crimson answered collapse with tradition, eradication by ritual fire. Their doctrine permitted no uncertainty, no enemy without response. Silence was heresy. In the wake of the destruction at Virex Theta, Crimson Command convened within the basalt depths of the Moor Bastion on Kael'tor Prime. The chamber was shaped like a blade driven into the planet's mantle, heat from the molten core bleeding into the obsidian walls. Blood-mirrored stone reflected the flicker of tactical holoflares. Crimson banners, woven from memory fiber and battlefield soot, hung motionless in null grav, each marked with past purges. The strategist core, 6 living warminds and their bonded symbionts, sat in formation. No throne. No name spoken aloud. Each heartbeat fed into predictive slaughter matrices. They did not speak of vengeance. They spoke of purge. Strategist Vorshin Ka, the eldest among them, directed her will into the counter-purge directive. Her bones had been reforged in the black combustion rite. Her cognition spread across 4 minds, grafted by ritual and induction pain. She had lived through the Jara cleansings, the unchaining of the Hive, and the fragment war against the tenfold swarm. None of those threats had moved as this did. It was not the destruction that disturbed her. It was the lack of friction. The Vengeance had not encountered resistance, it had simply passed through. Crimson law could not allow that. Something had to bleed. In Crimson culture, memory was engraved in consequence. Erasure without struggle was not just failure, it was defilement. The Vengeance, unchallenged, had made a mockery of Crimson certainty. Counterpurge Fleet 4, designation Red Sigil, was mobilized. 120 warships drawn from the 4 border hegemons. Flagships bore the names of old victories, Molten Faith, Purge Cycle, Truths Ever, Glory Through Ends. No emissaries. No broadcast warnings. This was not a confrontation. This was extermination protocol. Every ship underwent ritual inscription. Their crew quarters purged of civilians. Tactical intelligences reset to primal combat schema. The cleansing fires were lit in the docking fields as banners were burned, an omen to purge not only the foe but the stain of failure. Their target, intercept and destroy the Vengeance before it reached the periphery wall, a demarcation line still defended by Crimson outer bastions. The Red Sigil would not permit Earth steel to cross that line. They emerged into open void at the edge of the Dalos reaches where dead stars hung like broken teeth. Once the site of a collapsed neutron array, the region's shattered gravitational currents made long-range scans erratic. It was considered cursed. Appropriate. Vengeance was already there. Its black hull moved without signal, without flare, like a thought made manifest, silent and sure. Crimson formations hardened. Tri-layered. Core bastions at the rear, spear rippers up front, heavy lancers on the wings. Drones swarmed. Maneuver stacks unfurled like living script, each vessel choreographed to a battle liturgy written over centuries. They sang war harmonics through synchronized light pulses, blades of code declaring intent across the void. Vengeance answered with nothing. It fired first. It did not target the forward line. It fired one slug, a kinetic round at 0.12 C aimed not at a ship, but at a region of space where crimson formations were set to converge in the next 9 seconds. It arrived in 5. 3 ships ceased to exist. 2 more collided in the disruption field. A third tried to realign its gyro stabilizers and ripped itself in half. Crimson coordination fractured. Rear support attempted to reposition. Flankers broke cohesion. In the silence of space, ritual chant turned to raw evasion. Then the second round arrived, lower velocity, laced with metallic chaff, laced with ferromagnetic dust. The cloud ignited against crimson heat-sensing hulls. Entire rows of warships flared into radiant silhouette. Confusion compounded. Auto-targeting systems mistook their own sensor reflections for enemy fire. Pulse batteries fired into friendly shadows. One heavy lancer turned its beam full circle and bisected its sister cruiser. The Vengeance altered course by 13 degrees. That single shift ruptured the lattice cohesion of Red Sigil. They were a net, not a wall. It slipped through the net. Half the fleet pursued. The other half could not decide who to follow. In Crimson law, divergence in formation required ritual confirmation. That confirmation never came. Some ships waited for leadership, others followed instinct. Several fired on each other to enforce hierarchy. Strategist Vorshinka watched the battle from her command blade form, motionless, her cognition split into 6 parallel stacks. One by one, each collapsed under data inconsistency. Projections failed. Targeting trees closed into loops. She understood then, vengeance was not fighting. It was navigating. And the battlefield was a corridor. Crimson ships formed walls. Vengeance slipped between them. Drones adjusted vectors. Vengeance altered tempo. Its path never stopped. Its logic was not escalation but momentum. It refused to be still. On board the midline cruiser Flame Sanctum, Ritual Officer Kala Ureth gripped the scar pole at the center of the observation deck. Her hands trembled against the warm iron. She had seen 3 purges, memorized over 100 liturgies. But none of them prepared her for what she saw, absence given form. It dances, she whispered. It dances between our screams. By the end of the 8th minute, Red Sigil ceased to function as a fleet. 47 confirmed losses. 31 disabled. 14 fled without authorization and act without precedent. The remaining 28 vessels drifted, systems dark, weapons cold, command notes severed. A silence fell across the Dalos reaches. No survivors transmitted a victory claim. No memorial code was broadcast. Nothing demanded vengeance. Strategist Vorshinka issued a final sequence. One sentence copied across all Crimson High Command. It is not an enemy. It is a conclusion. The vengeance did not acknowledge. It continued toward the periphery wall. Crimson long-range sensors tracked its departure, slower now as if absorbing the detritus of its passage. Drones watching from half a system away recorded residual gravitational shears long after its silhouette vanished into the void. One sensor array, designed for measuring starbursts, detected harmonic oscillations echoing from the corridor like the final notes of a funeral bell. Within the great monasteries of the outer bastions, the Crimson Priest forges began shuddering vaults. Inner fires extinguished. Command codes locked behind ritual entropy. For the first time in recorded history, the Crimson Hegemony began evacuating its outermost bastions not from siege, but from principle. In Crimson belief, war was the knife that shaped memory. But the vengeance left no shape. Only void. Silence was no longer heresy. Silence was preparation. And in that silence, something else stirred. Deep within a quarantine vault on Urekthal, a message pulsed to life, an unmarked signal from the distant Kuiper drift. Archivist Vale Oren stood alone beneath the vaulted arch of the memory chamber. Rows of warscript glowed before her eyes. Glyphs once sealed in blood rites began to uncurl, revealing names not spoken in over a century. Her breath hitched. She reached for the emergency breaker, hesitated. Her hands shook. No Crimson had wept in a generation, yet now tears carved lines through the dust on her faceplate. Two names. Vengeance. Vigilance. They built more than one. They built a purpose. And behind her, the ritual alarms began to ring, not shrill, not loud, but steady. A pulse. A signal. The hegemony began to rearm, not to fight, but to remember. The signal did not come with a warning. No pulse distortion. No quantum preamble. No comms layer handshake. It arrived across all known bands simultaneously: audible, visual, compressed thought form, hardline static, deep wave linguistic core. It bypassed firewalls, ignored decrypt routines, slid between frequency nodes as though it had always belonged there. Across the galaxy it played. On the Accord capital moon, where temples of light coiled around crystalline towers, citizens dropped their offerings mid-chant. Priests recoiled from glowing altars as their memory filaments flickered and went dark. On Crimson Monastery war barges, engines fell silent as memory-steeped crew collapsed to their knees. Pirate enclaves, merchant fleets, terraforming drones in deep, unsupervised sectors. Every system, every fragment of civilization heard it. The voice was human, gravel and steel, a Terran accent, neutral and sharpened by war. Unmistakably alive. This is Earth. We are not extinct. We remember what was done. We did not return to ask permission. The transmission lasted 37 seconds. No origin vector. No radiation signature. No temporal shift. No way to triangulate. It was perfect. The message reached even places thought unreachable. Vaults beneath the ice crust of Gorth Prime. Forgotten beacons left by the spindle diaspora. Even the long-dead interlace archive on Omega-7, untouched for centuries, pulsed once. The voice carried with it subharmonics. Hidden within the grain of its cadence, the breath between syllables, were activation codes. Across 100 worlds, old machines stirred. In Nova space, sub-AI minds across the Accord fell into recursive error states. Thought trees collapsed. Protocols suspended themselves in real time. 2 entire coral mines went dark to avoid predictive infection. The Harmonious Council adjourned in silence. A meeting left unresolved for the first time in over 8 millennia. On the fringe world of Veldareth, an archivist wept blood through her neural lace as the signal played through her cerebral socket. She survived. She wrote nothing down. When asked what she heard, she said only, "The truth," spoken without apology. In the Crimson Hegemony, the message was received inside the vault of irrevocable wounds. This playback ignited half a dozen lockdown protocols. Forbidden war doctrines unsealed. Tactical scripture, written in blood codes and heat-seared glyphs, lit the vault walls as though a second sun had risen. Crimson military doctrine held that all signals must be challenged. This one was not. It was recorded, stored, revered, because encryption implies the sender fears interception. Humanity did not fear being heard. They wanted to be. On Kael'tor Prime, strategist Vorshinka stood atop the ruined Echo Dais in the Silent Hall. The chamber had not been entered in 400 years. Her armor hissed with residual atmosphere purge, her limbs wrapped in silence threads. The dais, once a stage of execution for traitors, was now her pulpit. She broadcast no message. She did not meet with her peers. Her final words to the strategist core, spoken only once before memory stasis claimed her. We are no longer reacting to the past. We are living inside their proof. She stepped into the sarcophagus of still iron. Her cognition slowed, locked. Across the Accord, Ascendant Kilesvor watched the signal loop again, and again, for 100 repetitions. Her core shell pulsed with biofeedback dissonance. She did not interrupt. She did not speak. Around her, the coral mines fell silent. Not from shock, not from fear, but from recognition. Humanity had not returned to negotiate. Earth had spoken as judge, and the sentence had begun. In a buried relay shell beneath the moons of Chiral, an engineer named Doma Jan sat alone in a vibration shelter. The rest of her outpost had gone dark hours before. Supply lines cut, local field AI frozen in place. She'd been watching the backup transceiver readout flicker uselessly when the signal came through. It didn't roar. It didn't scream. It settled, like a heartbeat that had never stopped. She felt it more than heard it. Her jaw clenched, her back straightened. She whispered into the silence, "You're real." Her hands, reflexively, began to sign her old language, a Terran-based dialect banned 3 generations ago. In the deep wave aftermath, silence reigned. But within that silence, the starfields trembled. In the rimward sector, beyond the ash halo, a ship bloomed from darkness. At first, it appeared as a void anomaly, a region of nothing that distorted mass scans and starlight. Then came the refraction, the gravitational echo, the low-frequency hum that set orbital plate arrays trembling across the nearby belt. A ship, larger than the Vengeance, thicker, asymmetrical, its hull etched with orbital scars, welds torn and redone by hand, exposed plating, no emission fields, no shield bloom. Yet it lived. As it moved, the darkness did not part. It clung to the vessel's surface, as though even the void feared it. The ship bore no visible weapons, but it did not need them. On its hull, scorched into the metal by torch and gravity pulse, was a name. Not printed, not broadcast, torn. E.S.S. verdict. The signal looped again. "This is Earth. We remember. We did not forget you." On the asteroid station, Banshee's cry, a former pirate warlord, now blind and fused to his command shell, cried without knowing why. He whispered old names. His crew did not understand. None of them remembered Earth. But Earth remembered them. In the Nova Accord, data centers reactivated ancient Terran studies, files previously sealed under cultural quarantine. They read of human retaliation, human endurance, human spite, histories dismissed as myth, traits dismissed as weakness, now reviewed under new designations: tactical unpredictability, civilizational reconstitution under pressure, distributed retaliatory capacity. In the hegemony, scripture changed. The phrase "in fire, we decide" was replaced by a new invocation. In memory, we are judged. In the outsystem mind temple of the uncoded church, a synthetic faith collective with no allegiance, wordless chants filled their black-draped data halls. Their oracles, blind and ancient, declared the signal not a broadcast, but a key. One of them wrote, "Earth has spoken in blood, not to explain, but to unlock." And far below Earth's long-dead sky, in a cavern deep beneath the crust, a final machine blinked to life. Not a ship, not a weapon, a library, sealed for 120 years, containing the last complete record of the terraform purges, the collapse of Earth, and the construction of the 3 warships: Vengeance, Vigilance, Verdict. And beside that archive sat a chair. The air smelled of rusted insulation, ozone, and ancient dust. Thin streams of condensation glistened against the iron walls, pulsing with the slow, steady heartbeat of deep-core fusion capacitors. Lights glowed not in rows, but in glyphs. In the chair sat a man. His face was lined. His skin bore the faded tattoos of Terran fleet code. His eyes were clear. His voice had been recorded before. His breath had traveled light years in 37 seconds of galactic reckoning. Now he sat in silence. A monitor displayed 3 blinking symbols, each the shape of an old Earth continent. As the verdict entered the soul halo, one lit up. He looked at it, nodded, and whispered, not for the galaxy, but for himself, "Now you see us." The verdict did not change velocity. It did not broadcast acknowledgement of the signal loop. It did not deviate from the soul halo. It moved through the asteroid-choked edge of the system with the indifference of a glacier massing more than any mobile structure recorded in galactic history. By the time the Nova Accord and Crimson Hegemony recovered enough protocol bandwidth to react, the trap was already building itself. Virex Theta had once been a failed colony, a triple moon orbit in a decaying belt scarred by plasma mining and orbital overharvest. Its atmosphere had long since vented to the void. No one lived there. That precisely made it ideal. Nova engineers, those who had not fled or entered ritual silence, began installing singularity anchors, magripulsar fields, and gravitic coalescence webs. Crimson fleets, stripped of doctrine and pride, supplied mass and heat. Thousands of decommissioned ships melted into latticework. They did not call it cooperation. They did not speak at all. They built together in silence. Above Virex Theta, the trap became a ring. A noose. They called it final proof. The plan was simple: lure the verdict into the orbital belt, detonate layered quantum collapsers to bind its mass, and trigger a dual-origin singularity spike. It was not designed to kill, only to stop, to prove that the galaxy could still assert will. The ring extended 75,000 kilometers wide, with 6 staggered layers of phase interrupt fields. Thousands of lattice nodes charged with gravitic stress. Dozens of Crimson Dreadnought reactors were embedded at key junctions, sacrificed as ignition cores. No command center existed. Final proof was autonomous. No civilization wanted its name on the failure, or its fingerprints on another reckoning. As the trap formed, distant signals confirmed the approach of vigilance. Slower, methodical, on a separate trajectory from verdict. Its hull was observed only through mass differential and low-band distortion. No shape, no pulse, just inevitability. The implications splintered simulation minds. A third ship, a third principle. Across Accord and Hegemony alike, command hierarchies cracked. Some factions wanted to flee. Others demanded attack. A few suggested emulation. The dominant consensus was worse: paralysis. They began to fall into the pattern Earth had laid down, not with weapons, but with silence. The verdict entered Virex space 23 hours ahead of projections. It crossed the outer orbit without triggering alarms. It did not accelerate, did not slow. Its systems emitted no pressure wake, no propulsion flare, no pulse. Still, the trap activated. Mass snares engaged. Grav tethers snapped forward. Quantum locks pulsed like heartbeats through the orbital lattice. For a moment, less than a second, the verdict stalled. It was enough. Sensor arrays flashed. Data surged. Mass-to-volume ratios indexed. For the first time, the galaxy had a shape. A weight. A boundary to the fear. On a Nova relay post embedded within Virex's second moon, a lone technician gasped as her interface lit with cascading telemetry. She whispered into the open void channel. "We see it. We see it." Then the verdict reacted. The outer hull lit not with weapons, but with glyphs. Dozens. Hundreds. Carved into alloy. Ancient Earth battle language. Old code. Terran unit emblems. Insignias of dead nations. None were powered. They reflected no light. They simply were. And then the verdict began to move again. It did not fire. It did not evade. It shed armor. Plates peeled off its hull like dead skin. Hull layers that had once served as armor began to break formation, each segment drifting outward, slow, perfect, each piece shaped. They were not debris. They were ships. Each hull plate was a gunship, a drone, a kinetic platform. Self-contained. Silent. Some were 20 meters long, others near dreadnought scale. All bore the same rough welding, the same signs of hand reconstruction. Their serials had been erased. Their identities were action. They did not return fire. They did not target. They simply waited. The verdict passed through the heart of final proof unscathed. The gravitational bind collapsed in its wake. The orbit shattered. Anchor points failed. Magnetic tethers snapped. Singularity cores destabilized and blinked out one by one. In its passing, the vacuum rippled. Sensor shadows lingered like bruises. Light distorted subtly around the path it had taken, leaving a corridor of bent spectrum and magnetic haze, a scar etched into the void. Of the trap, only echoes remained. On the bridge of the last remaining observer vessel, a Crimson tactician named Cadvor watched in silence. She had once burned entire colonies for hesitation. Now she whispered, "We built a cage for the storm and left the door open." And across every sensor still functioning, a new signal bloomed. Not from Earth. From vigilance. The signal struck deeper than the first. It did not speak to systems. It spoke to infrastructure, waking up old code buried inside communications relays, dry dock processors, inertial guidance software. Not as a virus, not as a takeover. As a directive. All surviving Terran infrastructure, aligned by legacy code. Stand by for full reactivation. It did not sound like an AI, nor like a broadcast. The cadence was unmistakably human. Male. Calm. Not threatening. Only certain. Thousands of ships, derelict freighters, gutted stations, buried bunkers, shuddered back to life. On a half-melted orbital foundry orbiting Rex 3, a technician screamed as 30 unused kinetic lathes turned on simultaneously. The control AI had no record of ignition. Only one line appeared in the log. Awaiting verdict priority sync. On the Accord's oldest relay, Relay 1 Astra, a hub thought dead for 600 years, the following message scrolled across the interface. Earth directive confirmed. Begin Phase 2. Do not resist. On a desert world deep in the independent belts, a cult known only as the Hollow Symmetry knelt before the projection of the signal. Their prophets had long claimed Earth was not dead, only waiting. When the directive sounded, they prostrated themselves in silence. No doctrine adjusted. They had always known. For the first time, Earth had spoken twice. And now it was not announcing. It was commanding. No species had ever issued a directive to the galaxy. Not the harmonious minds of the Accord with their thousand-year symphonies of logic. Not the Crimson Hegemony with their purge cycles and declaration flames. Not the endless organ fleets of the old primogen who measured expansion in generations of breath. But Earth had. And it had done so without consultation. In the days following Final Proof's collapse, the core networks of every major civilization reeled. Terran signals continued, not loud, not invasive. Steady. Methodical. Directed. Across hundreds of systems, ancient infrastructure obeyed. On a half-cracked solar farm orbiting the dead world of Sirakel, panels reoriented themselves after centuries adrift. On the crimsoned moons of Talvaresh, a long-dormant planetary gate blinked green across its surface and began to hum. Deep within the quantum banks of Accord's university moons, something once thought metaphor, protocol Selim, unfolded into executable form. Designed by Terran emergency planners in the twilight of the collapse, it was a planetary-scale failsafe, a blueprint for social and logistical reinitialization. Now it was alive. It was not sabotage. Not war. It was reclamation. Vigilance did not speak further. It moved steadily across systems, always behind verdict, always along separate routes. It never accelerated, never acknowledged pursuit, but every system it passed began to wake. On the edge of the Gorian expanse, a Crimson archivist activated a forbidden sensor array to track the directive's path. She wept when she realized the pattern it followed. It was tracing the old Earth migration lattice. Each system visited by Vigilance had once hosted human colonies. Each colony had been erased. Now the same path was being walked again. In the vault of relics beneath Accord's sanctuary world Kalen Spire, a philosopher cast unlocked sealed cartography archives showing pre-exile Terran star routes. The maps, long assumed theoretical, matched Vigilance's trajectory exactly. When asked what it meant, the head cartographer simply replied, "They are going home the long way. So we see every mile of it." At the edge of known space, on a refueling station long abandoned by both Accord and Hegemony, a synthetic scholar named E.S.S deciphered the deeper layers of the directive's waveform. He found redundancy patterns designed to survive entropy. Layered code from old Terran FTL seednets. It wasn't just a reactivation protocol. It was a template. A new Terran network was being seeded, broadcast node by node. The directive wasn't a warning. It was a foundation. Some systems began to comply. Small ones. Isolated ones. Even Crimson bastions, long thought immune to external control, began to show signs of shift. Not surrender. Something older. Recognition. On the Accord Deep Archive world of Caliph Prime, a band historian accessed a war record sealed for nearly 1,000 years. It showed the destruction of a human outpost in the early years of the Accord's rise. No dialogue. No surrender. Just fire. The directive had arrived in that system 3 hours earlier. The historian said nothing, but she placed the seal back over the archive and labeled it Return Acknowledged. Even outside the great powers, the directive rippled. In the Ival Fringe, a refugee colony aboard the asteroid hive Joran's Mercy saw its reactor cores pulse for the first time in 3 decades. The lights returned, one sector at a time. A food synthesis bay reinitialized. The AI administrator, mute since the last war, began to speak in Old Terran. The youngest child aboard pointed to the nearest sensor screen. There, in a grainy image drifting through interference static, flew Vigilance. Silent. Still. She whispered, "It's not just a ship. It's a memory." Above the war-scarred remains of Xeris II, 2 Crimson warships powered down all weapons. Without command. Without signal. Just silence. Their captains left the bridge. The crew did not question. Humanity's presence was no longer inferred. It was mapped. And the map was growing. Above the world of Dorashmir, the 3rd Terran ship appeared. It was not announced. It arrived in darkness. Smaller than Vigilance. Sleeker. Built like a lance. Its gravimetric profile was erratic, blurring between states. Planetary defense scans failed to categorize its hull. Some systems read organic, others read obsidian. All agreed it moved like intent incarnate. Its name read E.S.S. Resurgence, and it did not speak at all. It simply dove into the atmosphere of Dorashmir at terminal velocity and did not burn. 100 satellites tracked it. None survived the descent pulse. Surface impact analysis suggested deceleration within 1 meter of contact. No crater. No seismic disruption. Only absence. It vanished into the crust. On a cliffside observatory overlooking Dorashmir's southern pole, an exile named Varenwith watched the sky without blinking. He had seen many falls, ships, stations, cities, but none like this. When the glow faded, he simply whispered, "It has begun." The directive continued. All systems built with Terran principles, align. All descendants of Terran species, wake. All oaths broken by fire, remember. On Crimson Agricultural Moon Tyvar 6, every seed vault opened. Entire genome caches once thought lost began to self-sort. Terraforming drones unearthed themselves from fallow soil. One farmer awoke to find earth wheat growing in parallel rows beneath alien sky. She wept. Then she harvested. On the accordion sanctuary shrine of Velkiura, the oracle mind dissolved mid-ritual. Not in failure, but in peace. Its last words spoken through one of the 1,000 choir voices. They came through fire. We taught them silence. They returned with both. The youngest child aboard Joran's Mercy, hearing the words repeat across the ship's walls, turned once more to her mother and asked, "Is Earth here?" And her mother answered, "Not yet, but it's listening." It no longer repeated itself, because it did not need to. Everyone was already listening. Resurgence did not transmit, did not flare, and did not wait. It tunneled through Dorashmir's crust without violating mass integrity protocols. Its hull displaced surrounding rock without heat. Subterranean scans showed no fusion residue, no kinetic bloom, no seismic waveforms. Only an expanding tunnel of absence, like a void carving its way into the planet. At 23.9 kilometers below surface, Resurgence stopped. It unfolded. Not in explosion. Not in bloom. In geometry. The hull segmented into interlocking shells, each rotating away from the next. They did not separate. They expanded, creating negative space within mass. All external sensors attempting to visualize the formation failed, returning only the word, unreal. Those who descended to view it in person never returned. On the surface, settlements began to receive residual pulses. Not messages. Not words. More like dreams shared across waking minds, images, thoughts, memories not their own. Children began sketching shapes their cultures had no names for. Pilots woke with coordinates to nowhere inked into the veins of their arms. Miners felt the soil resisting their drills, not because it was harder, but because it was aware. Dorashmir, a dead world, had begun to resist classification. And still, Resurgence remained. At the Accord's Prime Observatory, a full-spectrum analysis confirmed a truth that froze the coral mines. Resurgence's inner mass was increasing. Not from material gain, but from conceptual density. Inside it, time and definition were collapsing toward a new center. Not a ship, not a weapon, an anchor. From orbit, Resurgence no longer registered as an object. It had become a topological anomaly. Light bent around it, not from heat but intent. Gravimetric waves rippled across planetary strata without source. And every attempt to describe it reduced language to metaphors: wound, seed, witness, core. On Dorashmir's administrative plateau, where once stood the Hegemony's tactical weather station, 3 analysts observed the anomaly without speaking. Their feeds collapsed. Their predictive systems flickered. Then their minds began to receive impressions, not voices, but alignment instructions. One reached for a stylus and began to draw. When finished, she collapsed. Her lungs failed, but she was smiling. The diagram matched the orbital map of Terran Exodus Pathway C, a migration lane believed lost in pre-collapse chaos. The station commander burned the file into a black box archive. He titled it, "Return Vector Stabilized." One of the Crimson War strategists who had served in the Helix Ardent Theater, now retired to an exile vault on the black side of a tide-locked moon, broke silence to transmit one line. "It is not here to move. It is here to hold." He then deactivated his warframe and lay down among the 1,000 books he had never read. The lights dimmed. He did not wake. Terraforming engines on Dorashmir began activating autonomously. Not all at once. In sequence. With pattern. They did not reform the surface. They reshaped the gravity field. Resurgence had become a pivot point. A planetary-scale fulcrum. It was bending space-time without force, only presence. Across the system, comms latency halved. Signal drift corrected itself. Navigation systems calibrated with no external input. Asteroid rings began to settle into harmonic intervals. Ocean tides surged without moonfall. Atmospheric pressure rose by degrees, imperceptible but certain. One accordion exoscientist aboard the orbital platform HFY stared at the data and began to scream. She clawed at her console, overwhelmed by the speed of change, crying, "It's rewriting constants. It's rewriting constants." She sealed herself into the comms vault and activated the internal purge. Her last words were never recorded. And every real-time scan, every energy probe, every sentient attempt to see what resurgence had become returned the same result. A word from Earth's oldest languages. Home. On a crimson listening post above Felt Axis 4, a machine cult technician known only as Marexon analyzed the secondary pulses emanating from Dorash Mir. The rhythm he found matched the cardiac cycle of a Terran female in deep REM sleep. He began to cry. When asked why, he whispered, "Because it's not broadcasting. It's dreaming." In a shattered Accord refuge nestled into the magnetic canyons of Kiralvane, a coral orphanage received a spike of heat through one of their ritual processors. It melted the outer casing. When the crystalline frame reformed, the internal etching displayed only one line. "We forgive you." The children sang no hymns that day. They sat in silence and wept. Dorash Mir's native biota, once believed extinct, began to show anomalous readings. Spore clouds re-emerged from desiccated stone. Fungal threads pulsed with bioluminescence. Species thought lost to orbital bombardment were found alive in subsoil chambers. A xenobotanist stationed near the equatorial trench watched as a flowering vine unfurled beneath starlight. Its petals shimmered in formations mimicking ancient Terran constellations. She whispered, "It's not just memory. It's instruction. The gravity isn't just holding mass, it's telling life how to begin again." She sent the file, then deleted her name from the research index. And still, resurgence did not move. It did not answer. It did not ask. It held. The directive returned. No longer subtle. No longer quiet. It came not in one voice, but many, layered, fractured, unbroken. "The Terran lattice has resumed formation. You were warned. You were spared. Now you will remember why." Across the stars, every system with buried Terran code flared. The center had arrived. It was not Earth, but Earth had touched it. The galaxy did not fall into war. It fell into pause. In the aftermath of Resurgence's descent, empires stopped expanding. Fleets drifted. Diplomats sent no messages. Border conflicts froze mid-escalation. Pirate lords recalled their ships. Machine enclaves entered recursive lock cycles. And the Accord, for the first time in recorded history, failed to vote. Every system waited. Not for surrender. Not for negotiation. For what Earth would do next. On Kael'tor Prime, the Crimson Strategist Vault remained sealed. No new orders were issued. Warflocks remained docked in hangar tombs, wings folded like ancient predatory insects. Recruitment rites were postponed. The Great Pulse, a ceremony of fire and selection, was cancelled without announcement. War priests closed the Pillar of Blood and instead performed the Rite of Inward Flame, a ritual of watching. Crimson command temples dimmed. No burning banners, no pulse horns. Only silence, illuminated by the faint blue glow of memory lattice shrines. It was not mourning. It was waiting for comprehension. In Nova space, the coral minds engaged in passive recursion, looping predictive trees until they tangled into silence. The thawbound, those few given voices within the Accord offered no interpretations. Thousands of simultaneous debates began in simulation clusters, but none ended. The Accord's central debate spiral, Vel Ascension Loop, remained unused for 71 hours, a record unmatched since the Accord's founding. In high orbit above Terralis Station, the Accord's archivist thread Alan Veer composed a verse and deleted it 12 times. He could not find the correct structure. The future had exited language. On border worlds and deep colonies, silence became ritual. In mining habitats, workers left their drills idle. In harvest domes, crops were left uncollected. On the trade moons of Vostar, merchants flipped their signs to closed without being told. Civilizations held their breath. Children were instructed to remain indoors not for safety but to avoid breaking the quiet. Religious leaders abandoned scripture. The stars no longer needed interpretation. They had chosen their speaker. In a market shack of the Hollow Ring Belt, a smuggler named Sel Vanto leaned against a deactivated solar panel, eyes skyward. He was not aligned. He had no date feeds. His hull hadn't worked in months. But he felt it. Not fear. Not awe. Stillness. His companion, a child orphaned in the Corrid raids, spoke without looking up. You think it's the last light? He asked what that meant. She shrugged. There's a saying. My mother said it once. When the fourth light falls, everything stands still. Selvanto nodded. He didn't understand. But he remembered. Orbiting Resurgence, the planet of Dorashmir settled into stasis. Gravity harmonics no longer fluctuated. Weather patterns smoothed into planetary stillness. Even wind moved less. Local fauna that had survived in subsoil vaults emerged, but not with instinctual fear, only curiosity. They wandered beneath a sky so stable it felt unnatural. Resurgence did not move, but it was felt. At the edge of the northern hemisphere, a lone surveyor named Talvira recorded 13 consecutive hours of flat seismic reading. When she glanced at her instruments, she noticed something impossible. Her heartbeat had synchronized with planetary resonance. She sat down and did not stand again. For the rest of her life, she listened. In the darkness between systems, far from commerce lanes, a hidden network of remnant Terran observers came online. They had waited for generations. Each node, shielded from galactic interference, emerged from dormancy. Their directives were clear: verify phase integrity, confirm vector lock, report alignment. One such node, buried beneath the sulfuric crust of Polvarn, reconnected to Sol Trace Protocol for the first time in 126 years. It sent 3 pulses. No reply was needed. The system aligned. Then, without announcement, 2 Terran signatures changed. Vengeance, silent since crossing the galactic spine, adjusted trajectory. Its engines remained dormant, yet its motion became purposeful. Not linear. Arced. Every ship tracking its path recalculated its vector, inward. Vigilance, previously moving at drift, made its first observable maneuver. It reoriented not to intercept, but to match Vengeance's arc. The 2 ships began a converging spiral, slow and vast, their trajectories unrolling like ancient calligraphy. They did not broadcast. They did not pulse. But the directive returned. Formation complete. Integration event approaching. Stand by. From the automated observatory station Laura 9, in an unclaimed sector, a lone AI rendered the orbital data into visual simulation. 3 lines, curving in space, traced around a void that was not empty. The AI flagged it with an error. Spiral center undefined. Gravitation present. Object absent. It ran a prediction loop. Then it shut itself down. On a Crimson Warmonk's journal, an artifact coded only in bone ink, the glyphs scrawled themselves without hand or mind. There is no enemy. Only convergence. The Warmonk did not pray. He placed his journal in the fire and watched it burn. In an Accord memory vault beneath the blue ice of Vil Lyra, a forbidden script unlocked after 712 years of sealed status. No override. No access code. Just presence. It decoded in full. They did not build weapons. They built the ending. Thread Alenvir, watching from his distant scribe perch, whispered as he deleted his final unfinished verse. The silence is the stanza. In the outer dark, where no signals reached and no charts existed, instruments recorded a shift in background radiation. A whisper in static. Deep-ranged observation drones located movement but not mass. Form without substance. Speed without trail. Across 5 deep observation posts, the following was entered manually. Uncharted object detected. Direction, inward. Vector, originless. In Nova Deep Layer Observatory Theta 3, the resident AI flagged the contact with a status not seen in recorded archive. Cause, Earth. Not source. Not signal. Not ship. Not myth. Cause. In the archive temple of the Accord, the presiding priest minds reviewed all Terran files for the 3rd time. None predicted this. A junior memory steward offered a suggestion. Perhaps Earth was not returning. Perhaps Earth was reactivating. No one replied. In the emptiness, Earth's ships spiraled closer. Resurgence held the axis. Vengeance curved wide. Vigilance traced its mirrored arc. Between them, empty space, untouched, undefined. But something in that emptiness shifted. Not light. Not mass. Permission. The directive pulsed one final time. All coordinates resolved. Final element arriving. Humanity ascends. The 4th light did not fall from the stars. It emerged between them. Where Resurgence anchored gravity, where Vigilance bore memory, and where Vengeance carried reckoning, the space they spiraled around, empty, undefined, birth definition. A pulse radiated outward. Not in energy. In permission. Every system, every protocol, every buried node encoded by Terran hands acknowledged it. Locks unlatched. Circuits surged. Archives long abandoned displayed new directories. Planets realigned their spin by fractions of a degree. Lunar orbits corrected themselves to ancestral patterns. In the dust loom archives on the edge of known space, a synthetic historian lit its last candle and whispered a phrase once thought symbolic. Only when three returned does the fourth remember itself. On Dorashmir, the soil exhaled. Above it, a form appeared. Not forged. Not launched. Not summoned. Remembered. The fourth vessel. Smaller than the others. No armor. No weapons. No hull. It shimmered like memory under glass, impossible, precise, and known. Its structure mirrored the lost vessels of old soul, half-buried colonies, orbital shrines, decommissioned unity thrones. Its name wrote itself across perception. E.S.S. promise. It did not orbit. It completed. The spiral closed. And with it, the lattice. Across the galaxy, Terran markers lit. Deep planet listening posts began broadcasting again. Not speech. Understanding. Outposts believed abandoned began to pulse and sync. AI nodes thought corrupted began self-repair. Legacy humans, those who had vanished, scattered, or fallen silent, rose. They had not died. They had waited. On the Crimson Moon War barge Eeler's Grief, a young tactician stared as the directive's final form decoded in full. We did not leave to forgive. We did not return to punish. We built this to remind you. You were never alone. Now choose what you will become. She closed her eyes. She felt the lattice echo beneath her skin. The warbark drifted without propulsion. Its lights dimmed, not from power loss, but from reverence. In the Accord's sanctuary archive city on Velstera, the minds stopped recursion. One by one, their chorus tones silenced. Predictive lines unraveled. The last model dissolved without outcome. Nova Prime's star aligned 1 degree closer to Terran calibration. Orbiting structures subtly adjusted. No orders were issued. It happened as if remembered. The hollow symmetry cult dispersed into silence. No ceremony. No proclamation. One by one, they walked from their temples, leaving the glyphs to fade on their own. Trade routes shifted. Convoys bound for Nova strongholds changed course mid-flight. Border skirmishes bled away, their participants simply leaving. In the deep, fleets once preparing to retaliate powered down, not by command, but by choice. Captains disconnected from protocol cues. Quartermasters distributed rations for long-term hibernation. The silence no longer demanded reaction. It invited purpose. In the Ival Fringe, on the orbital monastery of Pale Horizon, children gathered at the edges of the vision dome. They watched the spiral from far away, eyes wide with the kind of knowing that precedes belief. One child raised her hand and pointed toward the center. It's a doorway. A watching monk nodded. No. A key. Another child whispered. Then what's the lock? No one answered. But all understood. In the Sol system, Earth's surface remained untouched. Ruined. Quiet. But far below its crust, in the great archive that had spoken the first words of warning, a man rose from his chair. His hair was gray. His body thin. His eyes still sharp. He looked at the symbols now lit upon his console: vengeance, vigilance, resurgence, promise. Each blinked once, then held. He placed his palm upon the center. There was no reaction, only affirmation. Around him, consoles reset. Not in code, but in clarity. Text cleared. Lights dimmed. The air warmed. The pressure equalized. The room became calm. And with that touch, across the galaxy, something ended. Not peace. Not war. Waiting. On the accordion cultural moon of Sinviral, an elder poet stepped to the center of a deactivated amphitheater. Her voice had not been used in 70 years. She spoke only one word. Complete. The walls of the amphitheater reactivated. Their mosaics no longer told stories of war or treaties. They displayed the spiral. A shape. A promise. In the void beyond the outer rim, a fleet of ships under no banner watched the final alignment form. Their commander, a former Accord admiral exiled for thought divergence, stood with her hand upon a cold viewing plate. She whispered, "We built walls to keep them out, but Earth built bridges to walk back in." Far beyond mapped territory, in the photonic dunes of Star, a silicon world without atmosphere orbiting a dead neutron coil, crystalline sensors recorded the lattice's final lock. The species that lived there had no language, no tools, and no concept of species. But they stopped. For the first time in their existence, they grew toward something. And from the center of the lattice, from the joined vectors of the 4 ships, came no light. No speech. Just presence. Earth did not reappear. Earth resonated. The The spiral was now whole. Humanity had not returned. It had arrived.